Hi, I just wanted to review a few concepts regarding how picture books work. So we've been talking about this all week long, and I want to look a little bit more closely at how images and words actually relate to one another. So as you know, these are interdependent storylines that are happening at the exact same time. And I wanted to use this quote from Perry Nodelman, who is a very well respected literary scholar, especially in children's lit. And I cannot tell you how many times I have cited this one source in every paper that I have ever written about children's literature. But it goes like this. Perry Nodelman states, words can make pictures into rich narrative resources, but only because they communicate so differently from pictures that they change the meaning of pictures. And the other part of this quote is, for the same reason also, pictures can change the narrative thrust of words. So this is from Nodelman's work, Words About Pictures, The Narrative Art of Children's Picture Books. And as you can see, this was published in 1988. It's still one of the top sources that is referred to when discussing how picture books actually do function as two works that have been combined into one. And so let's kind of break this quote apart a little bit. Let's look at the first part. Words can make pictures into rich narrative resources. So essentially, as you know, we always begin with the manuscript. We begin with the text, and from that place, then an artist obtains the manuscript from the publisher and then takes a look at what kind of story can be told. It's up to the artist at that point to interpret the words. And so that also means to interpret things that are just not there. And you probably hear Santino in the background, but he's just living his life, so nobody panic. So because they communicate so differently from pictures that they can change the meaning of pictures, this actually goes two ways. So when we look at picture book text, we look at what's actually being said, and then we look at what's actually happening. Those can be two completely different things. They can be similar, they can mirror one another, or they can just complement one another. And so what this actually says is that because words and that mode of communication, verbal communication, is so different from the communication of images, that words actually have the power to change our interpretation of what we're seeing. That same note, if we flip the other side of that coin, the same is true of the reverse. So when we look at pictures, the pictures can actually change our interpretation of what the words are saying. And usually we think of words as being something that's concrete, something that cannot bend or stretch, but picture books show us that that's just not true. So for the same reason, Nodelman states, pictures can change the narrative thrust of words, so basically how the story is told, how the story is being told. And then of course we know that the reverse is true. So there are three types of interaction between words and pictures, and this is something that you'll want to consider for your picture book analysis. The first is symmetrical. This is probably what is most expected when you look at a picture book. When you think of what a picture book is, See Jane Run, these types of things, that's symmetrical. The words and the pictures have the same message, and the pictures are simply there to reinforce the words. This is very common, and this is the type of book that helps children learn how to read. It's also the type of book that teaches children words. And so if you think of Dr. Seuss books, most of his books function in this symmetrical fashion. One of my favorites to point out as an example for this is One Fish, Two Fish, Red Fish, Blue Fish, because the illustrations that he has done alongside the words, they line up so well. And so if you're interested in looking at a reading of this book by various authors, I've included the link here for you. I don't know if this link will work if you click on it, but I do know that you can copy and paste the link into your browser in order to check that out. Okay, now the second type of relationship is complementary. This is probably my favorite. I think it's more common in some of these examples that we see for more contemporary books. Words and images are interdependent. And word and pictures fill each other's narrative gaps. So basically, the words don't say it all, but the images fill in the blanks. This is what I love to see in picture books. I think it's what makes reading picture books so much fun and so exciting. And I think this really does attest to the art of making a picture book. So the images advance the written story beyond what the text has said. A great example of this is Where the Wild Things Are by Maurice Sendak. Of course, we all love that book. And there's a really great dynamic that's happening here with the pictures because the words can't really say everything that we see happening in the pictures. So the illustrations do a wonderful job of filling in those blanks. This is where the text may provide information that's not conveyed by the pictures, or vice versa, that the pictures may actually provide information that's not conveyed by the text. And in our next example, our last example is contradictory. So this is the third way that words and pictures work together. This is where words and pictures say the opposite things to create something that we call dramatic irony. So this is what establishes a tension between what a character knows or sees and what is presented to the reader. So this is one of those examples where we can look at This Is Not My Hat and we can see an excellent example of this, where the picture is able to show us the reality of what's happening, and then the words are telling us a specific point of view from the narrator, which we know is limited. And so another good example of this is Rosie's Walk, published in 1971 by Pat Hutchins. For reading of this book, you can click here if the link is working for us, fingers crossed, but if not, you can always copy and paste this link into your browser, and then you can hear a reading of this book. It's very short. Actually, the words are very simple, but it's a great example of contradictory text. Even in the 1970s, the text ends up narrating this very quiet, uneventful, kind of mundane walk of Rosie the hen. And in contrast, the pictures actually show quite a bit of action. It shows a fox in hot pursuit of Rosie. So these are the ways that pictures and words work together. So this also brings up another topic when it comes to putting picture books together, the relationship between authors and illustrators. So this can really vary drastically from project to project. In the past, it used to be kind of a faux pas for authors and illustrators to talk before the book project was actually done. Traditional publishing houses, though, are the ones that usually pair the author of a text with an illustrator if the author of the text is not the illustrator himself or herself. Whether the interaction occurs between the book creators, words and images both need to be evaluated separately and together throughout this entire process of putting this together. So I know that for my first book, for example, Colors of Me, I had not met the illustrator. I had not spoken with the illustrator until the book was done. And when I say when the book was done, I mean I had a box of my first copies of the book arrive on my doorstep, and I opened the box, and it was the first time that I saw the book and everything together as one. And it was at that point that I felt compelled to contact the illustrator and let her know about how great of a job I thought she did and how excited I was to work with her and promote this book with her. But my relationship with the illustrator was a little different for my second book, Books Do Not Have Wings. For that book, the illustrator is actually Brazilian. So he lives in Brazil, and Portuguese is his first language. So his son, his 12-year-old son at the time, who was taking English in school and learning English, was actually the one who was able to translate the book for him so that he could illustrate it. This was his first time working with an American publisher as well. So there were a lot of other dynamics that came into play. So we were talking on Facebook actually throughout the process of him illustrating the book. They let me know who he was in the beginning, and I think we had a few contacts as far as me helping to clarify what I meant by some of the words, and him double checking his son's translation essentially of the text, so on and so forth. The reason that this is so important in the end, the fact that the words and the images need to be evaluated both separately and together is because now you're taking two separate works and you're putting them into one and making them cohesive. So I know that for my first book with Colors of Me, I actually went back and looked at the finished manuscript with the sketches, the final sketches. And once the artwork was finished and they sent me the master digital copy, this is before I saw the book in its book form with a cover and everything and binding, I actually had to look and make sure that everything looked like it fit together seamlessly. And I actually went back and I made a few changes to some of the words to better reflect what was going on in the pictures, because that's a book for a younger child. Whereas with Books Do Not Wings, or sorry, Books Do Not Have Wings, that second book was different. It was made for older children who were strong readers already. So they weren't learning words, they weren't learning language at that point, really. They were just learning how to read a book differently than they had read it before. And so now it's more conceptual. And so when I looked at some of those illustrations, there's so much detail in those illustrations that I could not possibly capture in words. And so that was a lot of fun, seeing those things come together and seeing what that illustrator conceptualized for the words. And so at that point in both book projects, we had to all look at these two works, the words and the pictures, next to each other together on the page and think, does this work? And we had to do that for every single spread. And I sat down with the publisher and the editors, and for every single spread we discussed what might need a tweak here and there, what maybe should be pictured, what doesn't need to be pictured, what should be said, what shouldn't be said, in order to create the best work possible. So authors and illustrators kind of have a mutual understanding of these concepts. And so for you to analyze a picture book, of course, you should be able to have a grasp on these concepts as well. So I hope that helps you in your picture book analysis project, which is upcoming. It'll be due at the end of this upcoming week, so on Sunday. And if you're having any questions, please don't hesitate to email. Thanks for listening. And Santino says goodbye also. Thanks for watching.